This is Kyle Hyman, and joining me this morning to talk about Paul, Apostle of Christ, a movie available now on DVD, Blu-ray, as well as digital downloads and streaming, is the President and CEO, Executive Producer of ODB Films, Eric Groth. Thank you for being here, Eric.
Oh, thanks, Kyle. It's great to be with you, for sure.
I have seen the movie twice, probably the only non-kids movie that I've seen twice in, I don't know, the past 10-plus years.
Wow, that's a blessing.
Yeah, it's really powerful. What's the response been like to the movie, and was it different than you expected?
No, I mean, it's been a tremendous response, and it's what we expected. Our mission is really about creating artfully made and spiritually rich films so people encounter Christ. So we really, our hope and our prayer is that, and we knew God led us to this place and really had great hopes for it. So when we see, especially after the release of the film a couple months ago when it had its theater run, getting the phone calls and the text messages and the emails and seeing the social media, just a different response and how it's moving people, just their commenting and the things that they take away from the film has been what we had great hope and expectation for. So it's really cool to see that happening.
How are people being affected by the movie?
I think what I see the most consistently is they love the way we portray Paul. Mm-hmm. Not to mention just that entire time in history. You're talking about a time that was very tumultuous and for the church, and Nero was a bad man, and there was tremendous persecution. And you've got, in the film, you've got to look at that and look at what's going on in the Christian communities led by the leadership of Priscilla and Aquila, mm-hmm. Played by John Lynch and Joanne Whaley, who were just really amazing in those roles. And the struggle of the early church and Paul being at the end of his life and Luke coming to visit him and continuing to write the story, to share that story. But all that was going on in there, I think what I hear the most is people connect, and that's what we really wanted to have happen, that it's not a story that happened just in the past, but they can connect their own personal lives to it, so they can see themselves in the characters. They can see themselves in that Christian community that's struggling with persecution. Maybe in our country, we don't feel the intense persecution that is going on in places like in the Middle East or in Africa as followers of Christ. But all of us as Christians have a journey that we're on, and we know what it feels like to be persecuted at some level. And I think being able to connect to that, I think also the most consistent thing I've heard people say is Paul's character, that this is a man who had that radical conversion, experienced God's tremendous grace and mercy, went on the road, became the most prolific writer and evangelist, traveling 10,000 miles in 30 years, writing, two-thirds of the New Testament.
Right.
And yet his life was still simple and humble. You can see in his writings, he references himself as the chief of sinners. Like, he didn't kind of walk away and go, I'm this great evangelist and I've got it all together. No, he constantly reflected on who he was. And you can see that in his writings, and where he says, I'm a new creation, the old has gone, the new has come. But yet still rooting himself in the reality that without God's grace, I can do nothing. Mm-hmm. And I think people have really appreciated that perspective, because it can be very personal, that in my life now, I need that grace and I need that mercy. And these people who lived 2,000 years before me were just like me. They weren't born with halos around their heads. They did amazing things that God called them to, and they did it by God's grace. I'm called to the same thing. And, as God calls me to be a saint, I can have a model to look at in Paul, as we tried to portray it in the film, as someone who can achieve that.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Full of Grace, the movie about Mary, was your first full-length film that you were involved with?
That's correct. Yeah, prior to that, we spent first 10, 12 years of the organization producing about 200 short films for Catholic teens.
Yeah. So how do you go from these short films for youth groups and for YouTube to this big budget, full-length films that are showing in theaters around the world?
Nothing but God's desire and plan. And that being said, I think just the journey we've been on has been prepping us for the next step. We produced a lot of short films. Particularly, we spent time producing a lot of pieces that can be used in catechesis. And we had at one point had some questions asked of us, actually by a number of practitioners in the youth ministry world. It was asking if we had films on lives of the saints. And we really didn't produce much on that, but being asked it probably a half dozen times, we decided to give it a respectful consideration and explored that. And that's what led us into producing Full of Grace, our first feature film, which even on day one of shooting that, Kyle, we didn't even think we were producing a feature film. We just thought we were producing something that would be a little longer in substance that could still be used. And we thought maybe 3 20-minute segments that we write curriculum for, like we do with all of our other films. But it became clear to us when we filmed that God was drawing us into something bigger that we didn't even fully understand at the time. And that one kind of became a calling card for us to be able, just through some relationships, to connect with Sony's evangelical division of Firm Films and to find out that they had been looking for a good script on the Apostle Paul for years and hadn't found one they liked. They read our script and they saw some pretty neat things in it. And that kind of led us on the path to work with them. So every step in the journey is important. I mean, without producing the short films, without having questions asked of us, constantly praying and discerning where do we go, we wouldn't be where we're at today, for sure.
We're talking with Eric Groth from ODB Films, produced Paul, Apostle of Christ, which, if you haven't seen this yet, it's out available now for streaming. Get the DVD or Blu-ray and watch this. It's so good. And I think that process of you going from small short films to this big budget, I think a lot of times in the church, and especially in the Catholic Church, we think small, and we don't think that these big things, to get a film in theaters, is possible. And so then we don't take these chances of putting ourselves out there. Any suggestions on how we can, as a church, take some bigger risks and think a little bit bigger than maybe we're thinking today?
Yeah, I think it's starting with the fact that I look at my journey and, went off to college and I just wanted to play baseball, but I had a passion. I knew God was also calling me into ministry. I was 16. I grew up in a solidly Catholic family, went to church every Sunday, prayers around Advent and Lent. That was part of our life, but I think all of us have that point in our life where we really know this is where I really decided to take my faith, my Catholic faith, seriously. And I was 16 years old, and I was on a retreat, and I remember looking at a cross on the wall during a reconciliation service and hearing God speak to me, not like I'm speaking to you now, but just kind of a confirmation in my heart. A couple of things that I had heard all along, like I looked up there and I kind of heard, like, I did this for you. And that wasn't a new message. It was just for some reason at that point in my life, the light bulb went on. And then he said, I love you. And again, the message I had heard time and again. But the thing that really kind of spoke to my heart was the third thing, and it was, I want your life. And I remember thinking as a 16-year-old going, I don't want to become a priest. I want to get married, and thinking, like, limiting it to, like, okay, he wants my life. What does that mean? Do I need to become a priest? But just exploring that and realizing that God wants us 100%. And so my response to your question first is simply, like, if we are willing to go all in and put the belt on and strap in, and to say, my life belongs to you, Lord. My work belongs to you. Whatever I'm doing, the ministry, the call is yours. It's not mine. If we release it and let it go, then I think anything's possible. And I think, too, as a church, we need to strive for excellence in everything and not think small, but think big. Have a big vision for what's possible and root that in prayer and discernment, because there's tremendous need. We know this. There's a tremendous need in our world. There's a tremendous need for the gospel to be proclaimed and preached, and done so in relevant ways, and especially in young culture. You just have to go for it. You have to be willing to say, all right, Lord, you're guiding me, and nothing is impossible. And it may seem impossible. Kyle, I never would have dreamed like that I would be able to have the privilege to produce a feature film. Even when we started outside the box and doing short films, even doing that was not even on my radar, like to do a short film ministry. All these steps along the way, God keeps bringing me into new things that I couldn't have even imagined. But I think the bottom line is take that leap of faith, trust it, listen, move forward, even when it doesn't make a lot of sense, and see what happens.
Yeah. I love it. So was this easier or harder than you expected it to be?
Both. How's that for wishy-washy?
Sure.
No, it was, I didn't know what to expect. That's probably the better way to put it. We were so green. The first feature film, Full of Grace, We did that on our own. It was much more money than we spent on any film we had done before, but it was a lower budget, and we found that and had it funded completely on the generosity of our donors to the not-for-profit. So we were completely in control of that, and that was a really great place for me to learn a little bit, for us to learn a little bit about how things work on a feature film set and a feature film environment. When Sony decided to partner with us, it was kind of like winning the lotto. Like, this major multi-billion-dollar company decides they want to partner with a small, nimble Catholic not-for-profit. Yeah. And I had no expectation. We dove in, and it was a great journey. They were a great partner. They helped us learn along the way. We learned so many things along the way. So I think there was a lot of things that were unexpected and things that were expected, and those unexpected things more of them were positive than negative. Just wow. And really rooting and building in us this passion and this privilege and kind of a sense of awe and the opportunity that was given to us, and the fact that we now have a worldwide stage in which we can share this art and beauty with. I have to pinch myself every morning when I wake up and think about it.
When you look at how much money was spent on producing and promoting and how many man hours go into something like this, can you look back at it and say that it was worth it?
Yes, it was incredibly worth it. It was one of the most exhilarating experiences of my life. Sony, I mean, a little unusual. Sony not only bought the script from us, but they hired us to produce the film. And so they saw what we did with Full of Grace. I think they really appreciated our frugality, what we could get out of a lower budget. And Paul was not a low budget. It was just under $6 million to produce the film. And so they not only bought the script, but then they hired us to produce it, but they also hired us, which was very unique, to help in the Catholic marketing. And that's something that I think, because of the world, working in youth ministry and building relationships with bishops and diocesan directors through the National Federation for Catholic Youth Ministry, and those relationships were so critical to us being in a place where we could actually help from a grassroots level. And so we had an internal goal. Number one for us was missional, that the film would really move people's hearts. But our second goal was that we could help move more Catholics into the box office for this film than Affirm Films had done on any of their previous films. We were told that the data showed that in the movie Risen, they drew 11% Catholic participation at the box office. So we kind of made an internal goal of 15%, that we could just show that with our relationships, we could help them increase that. And on Monday, the day after the film opened over Palm Sunday weekend, I got an email from the head of the studio at Sony, and the subject said Catholics, ... And the percentage of Catholic participation at the movie in the box office was 34%.
Wow.
And that was something incredible for us. And as a part of that, being on the road, for the last 2 months leading up to the film release, I think I was out on the road in 3 different states per week, and just promoting the film and talking about it and sharing. And for us, that's ministry, being able to talk about Jesus with people through the experience of this film. And very exhilarating. So tiring, exhausting. We shot in Malta in the fall. We had a 26-day shoot. We had 4 days off. They were 15-hour days. I mean, the whole process was exhausting and exhilarating.
Yeah.
All in the same experience.
Yeah. Well, it's available now. Anybody can watch it anywhere. Where should we send them for more information about it and to be able to stream it or get physical copies if they want?
Yep, you can go to, there's 2 sites. First, is the main site for the movie is paulmovie.com, paulmovie.com. And then you can also, our home website for Outside the Box for ODB Films is odbfilms.com. And plenty of information in both locations.
All right. Well, I can't imagine that you could possibly watch this without your life being changed. And like you mentioned, we need to be supporting art like this so that it can continue to be made. So thank you, Eric Groth, so much for joining us today and for enlightening us a little bit about Paul, Apostle of Christ.
Thanks, Kyle. God bless you.